Guys, it looks like that the escalation in the south begins because Russians want to break out of the positional warfare, and they also bring 10,000 soldiers to Krynky. Besides that, the Russian Black Sea fleet is set in motion. Ukrainians are constructing thousands of kilometers of defenses. A very big oil reservoir of Russians is on fire, and then, believe it or not, even more Russian major bases have been targeted and destroyed by Ukrainians. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. Whew. So, today we have our long-time guest, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, who approximately several months ago went to check on some of the Russian looks like Black Sea Fleet submarines which are in construction. And so yes, Mr. Shoigu, the cargo space of the... Wait a second, did you just say cargo space? I think you are wrong. Car does not go space, car go land. Senor Shoigu, I'm so sorry, we are not talking about cars. We're talking about cargo, which basically, well, you know what, never mind. And guys, today I have a very interesting request for you. Can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you think that Sergei Shoigu should remain the Minister of Defense of Russia? And here's the catch. I mean, why would Ukrainians not want something so incompetent and unqualified to be fighting against them? So, I think this is a pretty good thing that Sergei Shoigu remains as the Minister of Defense for so long. Let me know what do you think. But okay, time to get serious. And now let's talk about a pretty big oil refinery of Russians being set ablaze. Then we're gonna talk about another major Russian base being attacked by Ukrainians. And then we're just gonna switch our attention to the south, where Russians start to try to break out of the positional warfare and bring soldiers to Krynky. And finally, we talk about the response by Ukrainians. And so yes, first of all, to upset the local residents, were able to record some very loud noises coming from the local oil refinery, which is reportedly is one of the biggest supplier of the fuel to the Russian military. But don't worry, this is not over. Another big ball of fire has also been reported in Krasnoyarsk, which is something, according to the local residents, is a place that produces these so-called boats on the inflatable surface with the propeller engines, as far as I understand. And yes, they are also sometimes used by the Russian military. So it is pretty interesting that two military-related objects spontaneously got caught on fire. And it is absolutely unsurprising that the Russian media was not talking about it at all. And next let's go to the actual front lines. And right here is the one of the very first video of Ukrainians using their own land drone. It is more than 2 minutes and shows the entire journey of this little guy, which goes under one of the bridges which is used a lot by Russians. And then there's a very loud noise, which once again shows you how dominant drones are in the modern warfare, and not only the ones which are flying, even land drones can cause a lot of problems. And next is the video from Kupiansk frontline, where Ukrainians did an entire operation trying to figure out the location of a Russian sniper. They tracked him for pretty much looks like the whole entire day, and in the end there was an elimination of this troublemaker. The full video is once again a little bit too long to show on YouTube, and also due to the footage that it has, it will not be accepted on this platform, but as always you can see the fully uncensored version on my Patreon, the link is down below. As we go a little bit to the south, to Ilovaisk, located in Donetsk region, right here we have a report by the Russians that a pretty big Russian military base in this settlement has been targeted by Ukrainians, eliminating at least 24 Russian soldiers, and according to some other sources, this was one of the biggest drone flying training facilities for the Russian army in the east of Ukraine. So, the damage might not sound significant, at least for now, but it will only show in the future, because like mentioned a couple of minutes ago, drones are a very big part of the modern warfare. So if Russia is losing this capability, they will have a much bigger problems fighting against Ukrainians. And so yes, now as promised, we are switching our attention to the south of Ukraine, where it looks like that Russians are trying to break out of the positional warfare and are even bringing at least 10,000 soldiers closer to Krynky. And at the same time, reportedly, a Russian Black Sea fleet is now set in motion. But first of all, just a quick stop in Odessa, where as a result of a night attack by Russians, more civilian buildings have been severely damaged, and unfortunately there are injured civilians, but at least in the last 24 hours, Ukrainian air defense was able to intercept 11 out of 14 Russian Shahid drones. And as always, the response of Ukrainians is the attack against military objects of Russians, such as right here, for example, is another summary of a night raid by Ukrainians, which allowed them to establish the position of Russian post-observational towers and so on, and the successful destruction of these military objects along with the personnel. This video is pretty interesting to see, guys. I would like you to go ahead and do it yourself. As always, you will be able to find full and uncensored version on my Patreon. Once again, the link is down below. There is 1 week of free access for every single one of you to try if you like it or not. Thank you so much. Then we have another compilation coming to us from Dnipro River, which shows Russians who attempt to cross this water obstacle just to be eliminated by Ukrainians. And then in Krynky, Ukrainians reportedly were able to destroy a pretty big concentration of Russian forces close to this settlement. But it is not just this. Then also right here, for example, is the footage of a destroyed Russian heavy flamethrower called TOS-1 Solntsepek, and Ukrainians only used one simple drone to achieve this goal. And well, guess what? Russians finally start to understand as well that drones are a pretty big threat to their military vehicles, so besides installing pretty useless grills, which only make it complicated for the infantry and for the personnel to get in and out of the vehicle, they also started to install these chains, primarily covering the trucks and the wheels of their machines. And so far there is no proven help from these installations, so let's see in the future if it's actually helpful or not. And just once again speaking about Krynky, according to Natalia Humnyuk, it looks like that Russians start to bring even more reserves closer to this settlement. At this very moment it is reported to be at least 10,000 of them assembling to the south. At this very moment the entire city unfortunately is destroyed fully to the ground, as you can see from this video. No trees, no buildings, pretty much nothing else is standing. And Russians are obviously trying to push Ukrainians away from this city and bring them back on the opposite side of Kherson region. So far, unsuccessful. And unfortunately there is even more evidence of the escalation, because reportedly Russians started to bring back their Black Sea fleet from Novorossiysk port, located right here, and they started bringing it back to the west side of Crimean Peninsula. And reportedly in motion, the following vessels have been spotted. First of all, Admiral Grigorievich frigate, then there was 3 patrol ships of Vasil Bykov type, then there was 2 small missile ships of Buyan M type, and all large amphibious ships and all minesweepers. So unfortunately it does look like that Russians are regaining back their confidence, bringing these military vessels for most likely future attacks against the territory of Ukraine. And besides that, another news came to us from the report by the Institute for the Study of War, and they mentioned that it looks like that Russians are trying to break out of the positional warfare, the type of warfare where not a single side is advancing much while suffering still massive losses. And the report pretty much starts with the obvious, that Ukrainians were trying to target the majority of Russian concentration of their forces, not allowing them to pretty much do anything, sometimes not even being able to leave their own trenches and bases. And because of this, the report suggests that Russians right now are trying to achieve at least 2 things. The first one is the superiority and fire control, and the second one is the command and control I would say, services. Pretty much how the commanders and the officers are delegating the missions to their soldiers. Not just go ahead and run across open field, if you fail you will be eliminated or you'll go to prison. But right now it looks like that they're trying to actually bring some tactics and some strategy. At this very moment there are no reported big successes by Russians along the front lines, only in reportedly just a couple of places. And these two places, according to the report, is along the Kupiansk front line and inside Avdiivka. And speaking about the first point, achieving the fire superiority, this is where Russia needs to rely more on its so-called friends and partners, such as, for example, North Korea and Iran, and they need to receive even more ammunition, artillery and other types of weaponry and munition so that they can achieve the fire superiority, cover their forces and achieve the breakthrough in this positional warfare. And just like I mentioned in one of my previous videos, probably the only advantage in the dictatorship during war times is that they're able to help their allies much faster than democratic countries, because it takes so much less time for Russia to receive the weaponry from Iran and North Korea. And so, obviously, in the meantime, what Ukraine can do while still waiting for some of the military support from the West is to try and increase their own existing defenses, such as, for example, according to the representatives of the Ukrainian military and at this point some Western military experts, they see that Ukraine started constructing their own defense lines spanning more than 1,000 kilometers, closer obviously to the existing front lines in the east and in the south. And just for example, the biggest defense line at this very moment is located 15 to 25 kilometers away from the front line in Avdiivka. Just in general, Ukraine increased its defense structures by 63%. They are building trenches, they are building underground tunnels, they are building fortified constructions where the commandment is sitting and giving up orders. They're also building even this dragon teeth, they're laying metal barbed wire, everything possible to slow down the offensive of Russians, but at the same time, when it is time for the Ukrainians to counterattack, so those things will not slow down themselves. And the most recent confirmation of the existence of these defenses came to us from the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, who said that this will be a 3-layered lines of defenses, and the construction will cost Ukraine, unfortunately, tens of billions of hryvnias. But there is never too big of a price to pay for the victory and freedom, so as long as this will help Ukrainians to win in this war, everything in the end will be justified. The money will get back, the budget will be restored, the cities will be rebuilt, the land will be recultivated, and hopefully everything will get back to the normal. And guys, so once again, as you can see right now, it does look like that the escalation begins, starting maybe even from the south of Ukraine. So we might see some interesting and hopefully fortunate events for Ukraine in the near future. So once again, please consider subscribing to my channel if you don't want to miss any of this. Also, thank you so much my patrons for your support, and see you tomorrow.